I get excited about this stuff, you know. I'm excited to be presenting with Deb. She's retiring soon. Can we hear a round of applause for Deb Bryant and her work at DSU for many years in the part of HR and part of as a faculty member. And so excited for her to be able to go, but we couldn't let her go without sharing some of her experience and wisdom with us. So I'm grateful that she's agreed to participate in this with me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a video that I've been uploading and it's been really slow, so I'm hoping it'll get done in time, but I'm not confident that it will. So if not, I'll just have to show it to you on my computer. But okay. And please feel free to say stuff in the chat. I have a hard time seeing it while I'm presenting. So if you've made a comment and I haven't seen it in the chat, maybe Terry could let me know, or someone else that has the chat open could let me know, and we can maybe address that. But we've been tasked with presenting on increasing student engagement and participation in online courses. And that's quite the tall order if you think about it. Having students be engaged online can be difficult at times. But I've seen some things, and I'm confident there are enough tools and approaches that it can be done, and I've seen it happen. So it's exciting to be able to share this with you. First of all, I wanted to share with you some things. Terry actually shared with me a study they did at another school, but I think these sentiments have been echoed by students at our school. And if the video ever uploads, I'll prove to you that they have been echoed by students at our school. But things like everything is difficult, figuring out how the assignments in class was going to work, basically having to teach ourselves and staying focused was difficult. Teachers thinking you have more time because you're at home and working extra so you make enough money to pay bills, that trying to balance the time became super difficult. So a lot of our students are non-traditional students, and they're working 2 jobs and their parents, and it's just a different landscape in the online landscape. So one suggestion the student made was be flexible above all else. Make sure students are still hearing from you. Relying on content from other professors or documentaries on YouTube does not make up for time our professors formerly spent lecturing to students about material. So they miss the professor's input and they don't want to just have stuff from other sources. The student said all the classes are practically self-study and there's so much work, it's unbelievable. I'm behind and it feels like there's so much work that I will never catch up. So it's easy to fall behind when you're not meeting with the other students and a professor often. I see something in the chat. Flexibility is critical, that Terry says. That's so true. And I should mention, I was going to add a slide for this, but online encompasses this very broad landscape of, you know, hybrid and blended and asynchronous and synchronous. So when we say online, most of the time what I'm talking about is kind of mostly asynchronous online courses that are flexible enough that students can kind of access them as they are able to on their timetable. But there are a lot of versions of online, and I recognize that. So not all of these principles apply to every type of online learning, right? Okay, but I want to hear from you guys. And if that video comes in, we'll see if it ever comes in, but I'll show it to you maybe at the end. I wanted to hear from you in your experiences. I'll bet that a lot of you here have had experiences with online learning. And I just want to hear what the most engaging classes or experiences in online courses were for you, or ones that maybe you've heard from others or from your students or whatever else. So go ahead and unmute your mics or put it in the chat. What are some of the most engaging learning experiences you've experienced or you've heard from others?
Define engaging.
Ooh, by engaging, I mean you were interested in the content, you felt like you were getting better at it, you were learning, and it was an uplifting experience for you.
For me, or for me as the instructor?
Or your students, either one.
Okay. Well, I think students have a misunderstanding about the scope of an online course. My online course mimics my face-to-face courses exactly. So the content and the amount of work they do, what they would do, whether they saw me or not, So the reason I'm here is because my students struggled this last semester with content and engagement. And in terms of engagement, I mean, they didn't reach out. I didn't know. I didn't hear from them. And then when they struggled, they were upset because, you know, I don't know. So the reason I'm here is to get ideas to get these people, you know, back in class, a little more focused. I think this last semester might have been hard for everybody because we, you know, it was just a different dynamic. But the time that they spend and the amount of work they have to do is completely the same as a face-to-face class. So I want to find out from other people what you have done to bring them in under this context.
Yeah, and I think thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of people here share your sentiment.
Yeah,
Terry as well?
I was going to say, yeah, I also have a course that has a face-to-face version and an online version, and they're exactly the same amount of work, but the online students think it's more.
Right.
It feels like more when you're doing it all on your own.
Right.
Two things that, well, one thing that I realized is that I kind of have a chance to sell it when I'm in person. I tell them more of the reasons why. You know, I have a chance to say, hey, this is why I'm doing this, and this is what I hope you get out of this, and so I need to transfer that better to the people that are online. One thing that I noticed people liked, and I didn't do it as consistently as I should, and I need to make that part of the schedule, is, you know how at the beginning of class you kind of get up and kind of give a spiel about where we are and where we're going and what's happening this week and why, you know, kind of, it's kind of personal. That needs to happen for them too. And I've been sending out emails, but I think it'd be better if I recorded it so that they got a sense that this is a live person talking to them now. And then I might have a chance to do that selling, you know, selling of the course and the material that happens for the online students, because the comments that I got on the course evaluations were totally different between the online and the regular students for the same material, the same assignments. And I even have a flipped classroom. So my face-to-face students are watching the same videos. And yet the online students struggled a bit more.
Yeah. And we'll show you some strategies to help you with that later, Terry, as well. And Sarah, thanks for those examples. Deb actually does make those kind of weekly videos for her students to kind of do the, you know, not necessarily the small talk, but kind of the introduction of what they're going to be doing that week. So we'll show you an example of that. But yeah, those are real struggles. And Rochelle in the chat is saying that her daughter has done in-person, hybrid, and online only. And after one online class, she'll never do another one. And that's an experience that a lot of students have. They have poor online learning experiences the first time, and they think that all online learning is the same, and so they never try it again. But I've seen, and I know that it can be done, that online learning can be really a valuable and enriching experience if we do it right. We just have to learn to do it right? So.
Yeah, I guess I come into it from the opposite perspective. I did my doctorate mostly online, but I went in the summers to the university and worked with my faculty and the students that I was in the program with. And I felt like I was more engaged in that experience than in any other school experience I had. Instead of just going to a class and sitting there passively, I was intentionally engaged by the other students and the faculty. So and I'm kind of a hyper person. I don't like to just sit and read things either. So,
can you share a little bit more on that, Deb? How were you engaged with the faculty and the students in your online courses?
Well, I think part of it was understanding the purpose. So by the time you're in your doctorate, you have more clear purpose. But the doctorate program I was in was very applied, and you had to actually be a working administrator to be in the program. So it wasn't a bunch of BS going on. You know, we would get problems to solve, and then you'd suggest something, somebody would say, like, I tried that. No way, it didn't work. Don't try it. And so I found it so engaging. I'm a kinesthetic learner, and I need to apply everything, because if I just read it or hear it, I don't keep it. And so I kind of hold that philosophy for my students also. I think especially at Dixie, where we have open enrollment, I think we have a lot more kinesthetic learners that need to learn in an applied way than maybe at a higher university with other requirements.
Yeah, those are great experiences. And I think things that you've mentioned, all of you, are ways that you can be engaged online. And we'll touch on some of those things that you've talked about, but thank you for kind of starting this discussion, and I hope it'll continue throughout, of how online learning can be engaging and how you can get your students to be engaged, even if they aren't the ones that are PhD candidates and administrators, right? Or even if they aren't the super students, as you might call them. So yeah, we'll hopefully address some of these things. I want to start off by sort of comically, you know, sarcastically, maybe a little exaggeratedly, starting off with how you can definitely not have any engagement in your online course, right? If you're like a ghost instructor and nobody really knows where you are ever, or if you even exist, then that's probably going to be not a very engaging experience for the students, right? Or if there's just a ton of reading assignments, the whole thing is just reading a textbook, and then a 90% of your grade exam at the end, it's likely that that's not going to be a very engaging learning experience either. Or if you have due dates at random days, done random times, and you're changing things all the time, obviously that's not going to be engaging either. Or if you have basically an online repository of a bunch of other stuff you found online, that also probably won't be very engaging either. Or if you ensure that no student ever talks to another one, they're completely isolated. These things are recipes for disaster, right? So, and we've all participated in experiences like these. So one of the best ways to start is to identify your own experiences. You know what not to do, right? So build on that. What do you do then if you know not what not to do? What should you do, right? So, right, we're doing these authentic, applied, active, inclusive learning, right? Student-centered, all of it's student-centered. Now, as you've recognized, some of us have talked about this, in a student-centered model, if the student doesn't want to learn, they're not going to learn. So you don't have control over that. And maybe that's frustrating to you, but that's just the truth of it. And then that doesn't mean, okay, students, if you're not going to go find everything on your own and not going to just do self-study, then I'm not going to put effort on it, in it, right, for you. That's not how we approach it, right? Student-centered doesn't mean isolated student. It means that we try to help them and we think about them and the learning is focused on them. But if they don't want to learn, they're not going to learn. That's just the reality of education, and online education especially, because they don't have friends or classmates next to them bumping them all the time and, you know, forcing them to do things as much maybe. But so in this model, they have interaction with other students. We got to remember that. We can't just have us and them, but we also need to be interacting with the students and encouraging them to interact with students as well. So we're going to kind of go over some strategies to do this. But you may be wondering why I'm talking about this in particular, but I'll show you in just a second what the research shows us. And Rochelle, thank you for your comment in the chat about selling it and connecting with the instructor, having that relationship, because relationships, just as in with face-to-face, are what make engaging and make students want to participate in online courses as well. So here's one research study, not all of the research, but this is similar to a lot of the other results I've found. So in this study, this is their abstract, right? They say and it's kind of funny because they were kind of hoping to prove that these active learning, you know, events and strategies were going to be, you know, the difference between engaged students and not engaged students. And it's kind of funny because they say, the results indicate that there is no particular activity that will automatically help students to be more engaged in online classes. Surprise. However, the results also suggest that multiple communication channels may be related to higher engagement, and that student-to-student and instructor-to-student communication are clearly strongly correlated with higher student engagement with the course in general. Basically, what Rochelle was saying, that relationships are important for students to be engaged and participate. So there it is. The research backs that up, and it's hard to prove a particular learning activity or strategy is all the difference, right? But relationships, we know for sure, make a big difference.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, please, Deb, chime in.
So I took the online certificate program, and I think that my favorite thing that I did in it was I interviewed 3 students about how they felt about online and how they wanted to be engaged. 2 of them were extremely good students, and one that was less serious, maybe. But they all felt the same way about engagement. They really cared about engaging with the faculty more than they cared about engaging with the students. I was kind of surprised by that because they said, and something that in particular they didn't like, was when they felt like they were getting false engagement with students, like comment on, on 2 other students' comments or something like that. And they kind of did it, but never really felt they engaged with the student. It was kind of an activity, and they felt busy work activity. So I really think that that's an important issue, is that they have to have meaningful engagement with the students as well as the faculty.
Completely agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why you pay tuition, right? Is to learn from the experts, right? And you come to university. Obviously, there are other reasons, right? The social aspect is huge, and you need that degree, but you're hoping to learn from these expert people, right?
Well, in the business department, we make a joke that education is one of the things where the less you get for the money, the more happy you are with it. Well, I'm not sure that they're all.
You might have to explain that one to me, Deb.
The students don't want very much for their money. They would like you to be an easy faculty that gives them an easy grade.
Okay. I get it now. I get it. Yeah. Yeah, and that can be the case. But I'm hoping, I think this video is about ready there, so I'll show you later. But especially with online students, because they're doing so many other things, and like you said, Deb, in your online program, sometimes they're more motivated, and so oftentimes they're not the ones that just want an easy A and out of there. They actually want to learn the content of the course, and they want to get good at it. So here's a long list, not necessarily all things you need to do, but ideas for ways. And Terry, with 2 R's, maybe some of these ideas are helpful to you, and I can share this with you if you want at the end of this workshop. But frequent personal communication doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be deep, but just letting them know that you're there and you're thinking about them. It's a relationship building, right? I know that a lot of people try to do office hours even in their online courses. I know Deb tries to meet one-on-one with her students, so that's so important. Or a meet and greet online where everyone can kind of come and meet each other, all the students as well. Maybe you do a few sessions so that they can come if they can't make it at one time or whatever. Rubrics, assignments with rubrics that you can give personal feedback on. Skills development, team skills development. Discussion with differing views. Maybe Deb can explain this to you, but we talked about Bloom's taxonomy and how if you try to introduce them to the topic and then have them do higher levels, all of a sudden hey, this is what's that called? Quantum physics. Now create a quantum, a atom splitter. And they're like, okay, well, that's not engaging to me because I literally have no idea what that is, right? Deb, do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Well, I find especially I'm at an open education institution that we make assumptions, and it's not even just because we have students with lower grades coming in, but this next generations don't like to read very much, right? And so even when I did that interview, even my students that were really good students said, hardly ever read it unless I think it'll give me an answer for something, that I need to answer. So Bloom's taxonomy, they would hate me because when I give an assignment, I typically will show them a video, and before I get them to apply it, I'll get them to give me the information that was in the video. Tell me the 3 most important points they've told you on how to use chaos theory. And then I work them the way through so that I see that they've understand the concepts and can reduce them to their own wording, which is very low Bloom's. And then I get them to apply it in some more sophisticated way, because otherwise I have no sense of confidence that they even read the thing or made any of that comprehensive work that we assume people do when they read. So Yeah, I do that almost every assignment. I kind of back them up to the beginning, make sure they've got the information um, as part of the learning process before I take them to higher levels.
Yeah, that's great. So you got to find that sweet spot, right? You can't like straight in the beginning expect them to be able to do the higher level stuff, right? But at the same time, you don't want to just stick around in this lower level blooms where they're just like reading and understanding everything and never actually getting to do any of it or experience any of it, right? So that's another engagement tool, right? Kind of leading them up to the point where they can do hard things and be successful at it. Treating them as professionals. Deb and I talked about this as well. If you expect greatness from them and if you expect them to have quality work, and if you call them out on their discussion post that said, great job, thanks, and you say, that is not professional, that's not adding to the discussion, then pretty soon they'll be like, oh, they actually do care about what I do in this online course, and they actually are reading what I'm submitting. And so I'll actually put a little more effort into this, right? But if they know that you're never going to look at their assignment, or they know that you're never going to read your discussion post, there's no reason for them to, step it up a little or raise the bar or whatever. So treating them as professionals, very important. And Deb will talk about making changes to a course while it's in session, but that's also really important.
Can I go back to the rubrics one too?
Oh yeah, we'll go back one.
I was not a believer in rubrics. I thought, yeah, those aren't helpful. All three of the students I interviewed said it helped them clarify exactly what I was expecting in the end. So now I use rubrics. I thought my instructions were clear enough. I number everything, and still I could tell they were confused. And apparently, they like rubrics. So go figure. I do them now.
Yeah, it's really important. So that it helps you to give good feedback, right? Because you know what to give feedback on. You're like, I told you I wanted this, and it's obviously not that, right?
That was another thing my students said was they want personal feedback. When they've done an assignment, they don't even care if it's critical, positive, both, mix them up, but they want some feedback. Show that you read it and care.
And I give extensive feedback. I'm an English teacher, and so I give, and they don't, I won't say all of them, but many of them don't read it. And it's built in sequentially. First, we start with this and we apply it, and then we revise it and we write it again. We share it with our peer groups. And at the end of the semester, they're supposed to present a portfolio that's been revised, and they are surprised. And I'm grading for the same comments, and I'm grading for the same things over and over. And I think I might have let my frustration bleed through a little bit this past semester, because it was significant, the lack of effort with regard to the amount of feedback they got. So I'd love some of those students, Deb, I'd love to have the ones that say, yay for the feedback, but
yeah, Terry, that sounds like a great, oh, go ahead, Deb.
No, you can.
I was just going to say, Terry, that sounds like a great opportunity to have better communication with your students as far as letting them know that feedback's there. Maybe you send out an announcement or an email and say, don't forget to look at the feedback so that you can do better with revisions. And if you did, then that's on the name, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the frustration I have, I think is situational based on the past year that we all went through.
Yeah.
So looking for engagement in difficult times, is something that I'm going to have to ponder, because I haven't had this level of checking out that I had this past semester.
So was this an online class or a remote
I
class?
teach almost exclusively online, and I have for almost a decade. I do teach face-to-face, and because I still want to be in it, so I'll have a class or two that's face-to-face, but I've transitioned largely to online for English 1010 and English 2010.
So is it like an online course when they sign up, or is it just like a live online?
Well, except for the one time, except for last March when it wasn't, when we took our face-to-face classes, but yeah, they're not hybrid, they're solely online, and they know they're signing up for online.
Okay.
So, it's just interesting. I'm interested in hearing what
sometimes I totally get it, Terry. Sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's just trying to see what works. And if
Yeah.
it works, you keep it. If it doesn't, then you
Yeah,
try
and
something else.
it worked for a long time. I felt like, you know, it was working great for a long time. And then just this last semester it was really brutal for everybody.
Mm.
So
You know, Tina
anyway,
Vandenberg's comment, I think, is a good one. She said that giving examples of what a good one looks like. That's one thing my students asked for, that when they didn't do it right, show them what it does look. And I actually give them examples sometimes ahead of time, not of that assignment, but how a similar assignment would have been done. But interestingly, in our department, I don't know if Shandon Gubler's online or not, but he told me he did sort of a mini research where he checked on if he gave lots of feedback or a little bit of feedback, where he got the best response, and he said it was a little bit. So I think I was in danger of giving too much feedback too. And I actually had a student tell me, you know, you don't have to give me that much feedback. Okay, I will.
Makes it easier for
That's
me.
a strategy I've never heard of before, but hey.
I think it's like Jordan mentioned, it's maybe the frequency of feedback rather than the amount of feedback. And rubrics make it really easy to provide for you as the instructor, to us, to provide quick feedback that's not too overwhelming to students. But I've had faculty members express frustration to me that they spend hours and hours and hours grading and giving this wonderful feedback, and still their students aren't performing. And so they've had to step back and say, obviously this is a crazy year. This year has been difficult for everyone. And so students' mental health probably plays a role in how much they've been able to engage. So Terry, I don't think you're alone in having students disengage. But yes, I'm interested to learn even more strategies for how we can engage these students that are struggling.
Yeah, and there's some great ideas in the chat going on about, you know, video feedback and audio feedback, which you could also do that as well to kind of have a more personal aspect of that feedback. So those are great ideas as well.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes,
because
please.
I feel like I have a very distinct learning style that I sometimes let influence how I teach. And I'm just curious if other people have found that students actually listen to video or audio feedback. Because I know when I get that, I'm like, I hate this. I'd rather read. And so I'm very reluctant to listen to a video. It's like, and so I just wonder if that's something particular to just me, or if, I don't know, if students have ever commented about what kind of feedback or I don't know if anybody has any student perspectives to offer on that.
That's a good question. I know Huck has used video feedback in some of his stuff. But I like Kimberly's idea of kind of having both. That might be a lot of time, but maybe if your comments are short, you can add a video or text so they can kind of have either or. But that's a good question. Anybody else have any other input on that?
I can add one thing that I noticed works really well in my class is that, like, for example, after small bits of positive reinforcement go a long way. So, for example, after the first exam, I take everybody who got over 90% and say, hey, I noticed that your hard work has paid off. Good job. And I send it to all of them, but I make sure they can't tell that. And they're like, hey, you noticed. Thank you. That really makes my day. I'm like, awesome. Very good. And so then when I'm also contacting all the students who haven't done their work, then, you know, the people who are doing well don't get left behind.
Yeah, that's great.
I've used audio video comments in the past too, and I don't have a ton of data, just anecdotally. The ones that I send out to whole class tend to get viewed less than ones that I send just directly to a single student. So if they see that this video was made for me, I think they're a lot more likely to watch it than like a general announcement video type thing. So, and it's like Kimberly said, I think they appreciate the variety. They like to hear directly from you. I had a professor when I was doing a master's that for a big assignment that we had, one of the parts of the assignment was that we had to have a phone conversation. with him. And so he'd had a chance to review a draft. And then I got to talk to him, and it was like the only online professor. I did an online master's. It's like the only online professor I ever had a conversation with, because I wasn't the type that would seek out my professors, but he built that into his assignment that you got points for talking to him on the phone. And I really loved that. I thought it was awesome. And I'm not the type, I'm like you, Lauren, I prefer just kind of quickly read it and consume it that way. But to talk to him on the phone and get that direct feedback was really meaningful. So that's kind of another strategy, I guess, throw out there.
Yeah, those are great examples. Great examples. Does anybody else have a comment? Did I hear somebody? Diana?
Yeah, I have a question, and it's not on feedback. It's on that last one where it says make changes to the course while in session. What are they really referring to? Because whenever I try to change something in the middle of the course in the semester, I tend to confuse everybody with what I'm trying to do. How does that increase engagement?
That is a great question, and Deb's going to explain that in just like 1 second. In fact, we don't have time, but I was going to show you a video of Deb and her course, kind of having a personable video at the beginning of her course, but maybe she'll show you a piece of it if she wants to. But yeah, so just showing them that you're human, telling them why you're an expert in the field can be really valuable. But I'm going to turn it to Deb so that she can answer your question, Diana. Go ahead, Deb.
Well, are you going to, let's answer that question first. I think it's the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, there. So I was going to talk about this later, but halfway through so I teach business classes. And every concept that I give them that I think is important, I give them an applied activity to bring it home. So one of the things I do is it's called the GE workout. And so they do this at GE, General Electric, or they used to. What they do is they'd have a retreat for 3 days. They'd bring all their employees apart and they would have them in their work groups. And they would have them sit and discuss with each other. And I do this with my class, and I do it with fairly small teams, like 3 or 4 students only in a group. And I ask them to mine for the problems and then generate solutions, because it's easy for students to carp and complain about a class, but then I want them to give me solutions to it. And so this is what GE does, like annually. And then they bring their employees back, I bring the students back, and they have to present what the problem is and explain it, and then solutions for the problem. And at General Electric, and I do this in my class, is I have 3 choices. I can either say, I need more information. Can you bring it to me by tomorrow or something like that? Or by my next class, or I will accept it, or I can say no. But the rule at General Electric is the majority of things that are recommended, you will accept. So this happens at about the little after the middle of my class. And these are suggestions that they make to my class. For example, I used to give my quizzes, because my quizzes are open book. I don't find memorizing, it's not a good thing for me to do. I figure most of my students are adults and don't really like memorization. And so I only give them quizzes so that they'll read the darn textbooks, which I'm not sure if that's totally successful, but at least they'll get the points. And so my quizzes are very short. It's the highlight points I want them to get out of the text. And so I used to group them together like 2 or 3 chapters in one quiz. And the students suggested, that's really hard for us. It makes it, we're not focused on the chapter, on the subject. If we read it ahead of time, we've got 3 chapters to try to figure out. So can we only have 1 chapter at a time? And so now in my courses, I only quiz 1 chapter at a time. When the group brought it up, there were students in the class that said, no, I don't want to quiz every week. So they had to debate amongst themselves what was the democratic solution of this. And the one chapter a week won out. So, that's an example of things I do. I've gotten great examples, and they will explain things that they find frustrating that I hadn't realized were frustrating. And I can see at that point in my class an attitude change in my students, because I responded to them immediately. Like the next week, I start doing the things that they say. And there's like 10 or 12 groups or 15 groups sometimes. And that's a lot of changes, and they're happy about those changes because they were changes that they suggested.
At what point do you do this?
I do it just a little after halfway through the class.
Oh, at midterm, basically.
Yeah, so I find I get way better suggestions because they've had some time to think it out, discuss it amongst themselves. They come up with solutions, which I want them to do that as managers, future managers. And they're actually, it is a little bit, it's making you very vulnerable. And the students realize that, and they really appreciate it. I had just this semester, a student from Europe say, you know, I've never had a faculty member do that, be willing to like listen, make a decision, explain when I say no, I'll explain why no. And they're happy because I've accepted most of their ideas and made changes. So
how would you do it in an online class though? I mean, this was engagement for online classes, and
well, you could do it the same way. So I break my students into teams and I say, so this week I want you to work on this. You discuss amongst yourselves things that aren't working that you don't like about this class, the way it's being presented. Send them back to me and I will respond. You know, it'll be on a discussion page. I'll post all of them and then I'll start responding to them. It's not really any harder online than in person. But I know that it makes students want to take my other classes because they feel like I've listened to them. I mean, they'll specifically say that. So.
I've noticed that even very small changes that they suggested, they really love that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I will even say, hey, a student brought up in the other section this, and we decided this. And even that they love because they're like, okay, it was actually changed because of us. One of us made a suggestion and it happened.
Yeah, like this is a bad question on the exam. So I will either throw it out or something, give everybody credit for it. But yeah, I mean, we need to be flexible like we expect our students to be flexible. And it's sometimes hard when you're a faculty member to be flexible.
What I want to know, Deb, is if anyone's ever proposed that you grade on such a curve that 90% of the class gets A's.
You know what? I think they all think that they're so special that they were the ones that got the A's because they don't know what the rest of the students got.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think, and as you've all discussed and recognized, what a way to engage students, right? When they realize that what they say matters for their course, not just for future courses, that's a big deal, I think. And I think it's a great way to engage students. So,
well, and especially, you know, I talk to my students about being vulnerable. I put them in teams a lot. And they complain because they get thrown in teams all the time in different classes and nobody teaches them how to be a good team member or how to manage a team. So when my students are in teams, they each take turns being the leader for different assignments. So they'll have a team for like a half a semester. And one of the things I have them do at the very beginning is read a book by Lencioni, which is called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And then they have to get in their teams and confess the dysfunctions they're most likely to commit and give each other the permission to call them out on those. It makes a huge difference, you know, because students don't want to call each other out on anything. And so we'll stop 2 or 3 times in the semester and say, okay, it's accountability day, you know, what's not working? And they do amazingly well. And the teams actually are pretty good. I actually do something that's fairly harsh. About a little over halfway through the class, I ask the teams if they have students that are missing in action that really have not participated. And then, because at the beginning of the class, I tell them how to deal with, and Lencioni does, how to deal with people that are not participative. And, you know, invite them to be engaged, really work on helping them feel part of the group. But if that's not working, then I kick students off teams and they become teams of one. I tell them they have a choice. They can be a team of one and finish, you know, this big project on their own, or they can get together with the other people who are missing in action and create a dysfunctional team on their own. They typically choose to go by themselves. But because in business, I want them to learn that matters. And in the business world, they won't get away with it. And I think we let them get away with it too much in college. So. Yeah. Anyways, those are kind of participative.
Yeah, it's a great approach. And what you're talking about, Deb, is a lot of these strategies we talked about earlier and we put in here for getting student interaction, right? Not just having a relationship with you as an instructor, but having a relationship with other students, right? Making teams. Even in online, you can make teams. Deb and I have figured out a way to set them up with Zoom, which, by the way, quick plug-in. Every student has access to Zoom. And in Zoom, something you may not know is there's a Zoom client that can be housed on your computer, like on your desktop. And it's not just like this, it's not like a Zoom meeting. It has like a chat. You can make groups. You can like do, instant messaging. You can call people. You can see if people are in a meeting, all sorts of stuff. And every student has access to this tool. If I'm not mistaken, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but every student has access to this. And they can kind of collaborate in a team environment using this tool and, foster community and discussions that way as well. So Deb's going to kind of utilize that tool for the teamwork in her course. But, and as you're recognizing, a lot of these things work in the classroom as well. Surprise, a lot of the things that work in the classroom also work well in online environment as well. So anyway, Deb, I want them to be able to see your course a little bit, but do you want to go over anything else about student interaction before you do that?
One thing that the students mentioned to me, and it kind of was like it went along with not liking some discussions that they're set into. I feel like students want to do challenging work. I don't know if you've read Daniel Pink, any of you, but he talks about 3 things that make people motivated, that they have purpose, that they have autonomy or authority for the stuff they do, and that they have challenging work that they can master. And I really believe in the challenging work part. So I have some pretty hard projects. And like Jordan was explaining, they start their projects often at the beginning of the semester and they end up at the end of the semester. And it's sort of like piecemeal, they work. It's kind of like Terry was saying she does with her English classes. But I want them to be really proud of a project that they've completed at the end, because I tell them at the end of this class, these are the products you have, so that when you go for an interview, these are the things you can show off, because you should be proud of them, because some of those professionals that are going to be interviewing you can't do these things. So
yeah, I totally agree.
I
We talked
really
about how you can have everything be super easy, and so no effort's required, and those online classes are terrible because you're literally not learning anything. You're just spouting stuff out and you're getting an A anyway. Or you can be super difficult with 0 structure and support, and that's also going to be, not engaging at all. So it is a sweet spot. Supported up to difficult, challenging things that they can succeed at. So I totally agree with that. Okay, Deb, take it away. Oh, not yet. We're not done yet, but you can show them. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can show them a little bit of your course.
Yeah, okay. So then again, I have a hard time figuring out how I'm going to share.
While Deb is sharing, one quick comment. I've almost thought it a criminal activity when online instructors or any instructors in college don't encourage student-to-student interaction. And I think, some of the mental health issues from the pandemic I think can be attributed to isolation. So when we don't encourage that student-to-student interaction, we're encouraging isolation and students working by themselves in a vacuum. So boy, if we all as instructors can really think about how can I make even this online course, how can I encourage student-to-student interaction? And you guys gave some great ideas. I think that's so beneficial.
Okay, can you see my screen then? It's my online human resource management class, yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the very first week. I like to kind of throw them in it. So, if you go up here, I'm doing a meet and greet before, so I'll have at least 2 meet and greet Zoom sessions, and if they can't make it, if they're from out of state, different times or something, I'll have other groups. And I present this stuff visually as well as verbally, and you can see me if you want in some of them. Anyway, so that's how I do my lecture, and I have very short lectures, but I always want to apply almost everything that I lecture on. And so here's an example. In the first week, do we have any scientists in the group, physicists especially, that know chaos theory? Yeah, so Sarah, do you know chaos theory?
Some.
Okay, so, I give them a really basic introductory level. So they watch a video by a physicist talking about chaos theory, which is the concept that very complex systems are unpredictable. But they tend to have, with enough information, they have patterns. And they create these beautiful fractals when they put them on computers. So they make these beautiful. So mathematics does it. Anyways, Mandelbrot's theorem shows this beautiful fractal. So I want to show them that everything in their lives can inform them about working with people, and especially in the business world, which is, people are complex systems, right? And so I have them, if I click on this, if you can see it. So can you see that now? So I have them first watch this short video. My videos are always very short because I know attention spans aren't good. And then I have them read this article called Power of Chaos, and Margaret Wheatley, who's a sort of a social psychologist / business person, talks about chaos in the workplace, because chaos is a common thing in the work world. And so how to deal with it is one of the struggles of managers. And we tend to go super controlling to manage chaos, when really we need to create an environment where our employees learn to manage chaos on their own. They'll be happier, everything will be more successful. And so that's the goal of this. So again, like I said, how I go through Bloom's taxonomy. First, they summarize and define the key attributes of chaos theory. And then they talk about Wheatley's preconditions to making it work, which is sharing lots of information, having healthy relationships, and getting your hands off it, letting your employees struggle a little bit and work their way through chaos. And then I have them apply that to management, and to basically giving me examples of how they could use that in working with their employees. So I do this kind of thing a lot. I try to bring in other people's ideas and touch on maybe something that some of the students in the class can relate to and others not. This is a challenging assignment. It's interesting because when I was fully online, fully face-to-face, I'd give this to my science students in class, and I thought, well, discussing it all together in class, it'd be such a good discussion. They struggled. I put it online, and all of a sudden they were so good at it. I think there's something about being online where you can think about something that's new and challenging and not feel like you're going to embarrass yourself in front of everybody, and work it out before you post something. Their responses are so much more sophisticated online than they were in class, just having that amount of time. Also, the thing I like about online is that my extroverts come out of their shells. Even if it's in a Zoom online, they seem much more comfortable participating. So I'm a believer. I'm kind of an extrovert, and yet I'm loving online for lots of reasons. So.
Deb, thanks for sharing this. Would you mind, before we wrap up, would you mind sharing maybe like the team assignment, the team training assignment that you have them do?
Okay, now which one are you talking about?
Like the team training that they have to do, or they create a training for another group?
Oh, okay. So in this class, it's human resource management. So training is a big thing, and we do it really poorly. And so I have an assignment where they are going to learn to do some training. And there's a video attached to this one. I won't show it to you, but so I have them take a mirror at a 45-degree angle. So they have a piece of paper and they have a mirror at a 45-degree angle. And they have to write so that their name looks correct in the mirror, which is upside down and backwards, right? So they can't write it looking at the paper. They have to write it looking at the mirror. And this is something that it's totally new, and most of them can't do it. I wanted a training experience that would show them what it felt to be an adult learning something that's really hard for them to do, and how embarrassed they are. So one's a trainer and one's a trainee. So, after this, we debrief it with how adults learn and all those things. But I have the trainer trying to give instructions to the trainee when they have never done it, right? How do you write upside down and backwards, looking only through a mirror? And then I have them switch places. And of course, the person who has already tried it and somewhat successful is a much better trainer. So I talk to them about using your own employees as trainers rather than bringing in specialists or training them as a manager. I talk to them about physical memory. If you do that enough, actually you take away the mirror and your hand is confused to write it on the paper because it learned how to do it through the mirror. I mean, there's just lots of things that you can learn about training from this experience. And you know, when they do this, they remember it like years later, right? Because it had, when I debriefed with all how adults like to learn, it had made sense to them and they could apply it to themselves, how they felt embarrassed, how adults hate trying things that they can't do. So that's just, is that the example you wanted, Jordan?
Yeah, that's a great assignment. I was also thinking of the one where they create a training as a team for another team.
Okay, so
they do that later on. That's okay.
So after this, every topic that we cover, they have to create 15 teams of 3 have to create a 15-minute training. Most training lasts way too long, right? Like maybe this one. So in 15 minutes, they have to train one specific topic in an applied way to another team. And then they videotape it, and then they have the other team respond about it, and the other students in the class watch the training. So it's kind of on several levels that they're having an experience creating a meaningful training. You know, I don't like silly stuff where they're throwing candies and stuff at each other. I want them to do a serious business training like you would train as a manager. They do amazingly well, especially when I went online with it. It was another one of those things. It was better than in class. So I think we need to expect more out of our students. These guys are good at technology and less uncomfortable than I am, that's for sure. So yeah, I think it's exciting, especially doing applied stuff online.
Yeah, thanks so much, Deb. And we can tell that you've put a lot of thought and effort into these assignments. I think that's one of the reasons they're so good, is that you're so invested and you really care about them getting, you know, meaningful learning experiences that will apply to their careers. So those are awesome. Before we wrap up, I don't know, Terry, do we have time for any questions real quick before we close out?
Yeah, we've got just a few more minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions. And I think Jordan and Deb can stay a few minutes longer as well. So if you have a burning question, now's the time.
Okay, so I have a question. And I know a lot of people do quizzes for this, and I really don't like quizzes, kind of like Deb said, you know, you don't want to like force people to do memorization. But I didn't do quizzes for the reading material in my online class, and students definitely were not all reading the material as a consequence. So I guess any advice or insight on how to get students to engage in the reading without giving a mandatory quiz? Does anybody have any success or suggestions for how to deal with that?
So are you defining a quiz as only questions they have to answer? Are you opposed to any kind of assignment?
I guess that's a good question. I guess I'm opposed to like multiple choice questions. But I also
like summarize the points from this, or respond to something in the reading assignment, or that's often you know, much more satisfying than answer these multiple choice questions.
Yeah, I guess I'm also looking for a way to not create a huge burden of work for me, because I can't trust my students too, which is probably why the multiple choice quiz is the obvious answer. But I guess I could just give it really
spot check.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I guess I'm
gonna read 5 of these this week. Yours might be one. I don't know. That's an
interesting idea.
Just throwing out ideas.
No, I like that idea of spot checking.
A problem with this generation is, I don't know how many of them are in there.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
Yeah, they don't think that they have to learn basic fundamental knowledge because they can look everything up. And it's a real problem. You know, if your boss asks you a question, they're not going to say, you can't say to them, well, wait, look, let me look it up. You know, so I tell them there's some stuff you just have to memorize, and it's basic information and facts. And that's what multiple choice tests do. You know, mine have 10 questions and are worth 5 points. And because there's some stuff I just wanted to have them in their heads as much as possible. So I was like you, I tried not testing and they didn't read the textbook. So
live and learn, right?
Well, another thing to think about is that even us as reader, if you're reading something that you have to read and it's not a choice, you want to have a goal.
Mhm.
What am I supposed to be getting out of this? And so if you have questions that you're trying to answer, or if there's something specific you're supposed to respond to, or if you're trying to summarize, then at least you have a purpose and it's not just kind of a blank read this assignment. So it might even help. They might respond better because it would help them read better. It would make the experience better to have some purpose in what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I
a
like
couple
open
things.
book.
Oh, go ahead, Deb.
I was just gonna say, that's why I like open book tests.
Yeah, and I was going to mention, Deb, that what you did is, and maybe you make this explicit up front. You say, hey, this reading will prepare you for this assignment you're going to do later on, where you're going to create a training for other people, you know, and so it's a little more purposeful, like you're saying, Sarah. You could also have them do a short oral explanation of what they learned from the text. And that might be more telling on what they actually going to remember. In my experience, when I actually say something to someone else, I'm like 20 times more likely to remember that thing. So that's another idea.
Those are all really good suggestions. Thank you, everyone.
Just a
Good
plug
question.
for the DSU learning designers as well as the CTL learning designer and technologists. They also have some great ideas. If you say, I want my students to really take away these highlights from this reading, how can we assess that without creating a burden for me? They might have some good ideas for some learning objects or some other interactive things. But in addition to the new quizzes tool, which does have a greater variety that adds some spice to quizzes that could be auto graded, that don't add a burden to you. But yeah, let me put a plug in for those learning designers and technologists that you can consult with and say, I need some ideas for this. And maybe I'll put a link to that page in the chat in just a minute.
Yeah, Jordan's one of my heroes. He helped me put my 3300 human resource management class together, and it was so helpful.
Thanks, Deb. Well, I really appreciate everyone's comments here. I hope you've come away with some ideas of how to make your online courses more engaging. It can be a challenge. Sometimes, like I said, it's a trial and error type thing, but I hope that you take away some things today that you can make changes to your online courses and make them better for your students. So that's all I have. Does anybody else have anything they want to comment or add or say?
Thank you so much, Jordan and Deb. And if you don't mind staying on the line just a few minutes in case someone else does have a burning question, that would be great. And thank you all for attending. And again, thank you for the excellent sharing of ideas.
No problem. All right, we're going to wait around for the true fans, see who's left. Just kidding.